Welcome to Xi Jinping briefing. The content of the briefing includes: the Fed's higher for longer strategy on interest rates is slowly crumbling. Welcome to higher for long enough. After arrests and deportations, Mongolians worry about Chinese reach. Putin may have ordered capture of key city in time for election. Workshop collapses in southern China, killing 6 and injuring 3. The Fed's higher for longer strategy on interest rates is slowly crumbling. Welcome to higher for long enough. CNN. Investors are betting that the U.S. Federal Reserve will begin to cut interest rates in H1 2019, despite Fed Chair Jerome Powell and other officials stating that such a move is not currently under consideration. Some economists think a rate cut could come as early as Q1 2019. The latest inflation figures have been encouraging, and forecasts show economic growth has slowed since the summer. The Fed's two-day policy meeting this week is expected to culminate in rates being held steady at a 22-year high. There is growing confidence that rate cuts are only a few months away, with around a 44% chance of a cut coming in March. Whenever rate cuts do begin, the pace is likely to be gradual and interest rates will not fall as low as they did in the past. The Fed is expected to release its latest economic projections, which are likely to show inflation cooling faster than previously estimated. The Fed's favored inflation gauge, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, rose 3% YoY in October, down from September's 3.4% rise. After arrests and deportations, Mongolians worry about Chinese reach. Washington Post. China has clamped down on ethnic minorities living on the country's periphery, including Tibetans, Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and Mongols, in an effort to crush dissent and force assimilation into the Han Chinese majority. Beijing's efforts to silence diaspora communities have extended beyond China's borders, with the government using economic leverage and political pressure to try to enlist other countries to support its aims. This has created a dilemma for China's neighbors, who are in a position to offer refuge to those fleeing China's borderlands. However, these countries are also the focus of efforts to defend against perceived foreign threats, and Beijing views exiles as dangerous pockets of overseas resistance who could incite protest at home. 6 people who spoke to the Washington Post reported varying degrees of Chinese police harassment and intimidation through phone calls, messages, and pressure on their families in China. Mongolian activists and politicians want to protect these people, but there are concerns from Mongolian officials about angering China, the country's largest trading partner. They argue that as a young democracy concerned for human rights, Mongolia should be a haven for persecuted Mongols everywhere. Some activists fear that the Chinese security state could use cross-border policing ties to target critics of China on Mongolian soil. Putin may have ordered capture of key city in time for election. The Independent. Alexei Navalny, a prominent critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin, has been missing for 3 days following a serious health-related incident, according to his associates. Navalny's team has been coordinating a campaign to undermine support for Putin and the war in Ukraine ahead of the presidential elections in March. This comes after Russian prosecutors brought fresh charges against Navalny and his lawyers were denied entry to the penal colony where he is detained. Meanwhile, Ukrainian figures suggest that 338,120 Russian soldiers have died since the war began in February, with over 10,000 armored combat vehicles destroyed and 5,632 Russian tanks eliminated. These developments suggest that Putin may be ramping up his re-election campaign around the war in Ukraine. The Institute for the Study of War suggests that the military setting of Putin's re-election announcement indicates that the war could become a more central pillar of his campaign than previously anticipated. Navalny's disappearance and the new charges against him can also be seen as attempts by the Kremlin to silence opposition voices and maintain control over the narrative surrounding the war. The situation in Ukraine remains tense as the conflict continues. The U.S. Congress recently failed to pass a $110 billion package of aid for Ukraine, which Lord David Cameron described as a Christmas present for Putin. The blocking of aid would be a blow to Ukraine and a boost to Putin's campaign, suggesting that the international community's response to the conflict will be a key factor in the coming months. Workshop collapses in southern China, killing 6 and injuring 3. Associated Press. A workshop made from steel sheets collapsed in Guizhou province, southern China, killing 6 people and injuring 3 others. The cause of the accident is under investigation. Building collapses are not uncommon in China due to the lack of proper permits and safety standards. The illegal addition of extra floors and failure to use reinforcement is often blamed for such incidents. Chinese leader Xi Jinping has called for additional checks to uncover weaknesses in self-built buildings. Industrial safety in China remains a significant issue due to decaying infrastructure, poor safety training, and cost-cutting measures. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, here to bring you the latest and most intriguing news from around the globe. Today, we have a mix of economic, political, and tragic stories to discuss. Let's dive in. First up, we have news from the U.S. Federal Reserve. Despite Fed Chair Jerome Powell and other officials stating that interest rate cuts are not currently being considered, investors seem to have a different opinion. They are betting that the Fed will begin cutting rates in the first half of 2019. The latest inflation figures and forecasts of slowed economic growth have boosted confidence in rate cuts. However, when they do happen, they are likely to be gradual and not as significant as in the past. So, get ready for higher for long enough interest rates. Moving on, we have a troubling story from China. The government's crackdown on ethnic minorities, including Tibetans, Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and Mongols, has raised concerns about Chinese influence beyond its borders. China has been pressuring other countries to support its aims, creating a dilemma for those countries who want to offer refuge to those fleeing China's oppressive policies. Mongolian officials, in particular, are caught between wanting to protect persecuted Mongols and not angering their largest trading partner, China. It's a delicate balancing act, and activists fear that China's security state could even target critics of China on Mongolian soil. Talk about a tough situation. Now, let's talk Russian politics. Prominent critic of President Putin, Alexei Navalny, has been missing for 3 days after a serious health-related incident. Navalny's team has been working to undermine support for Putin and the war in Ukraine ahead of the presidential elections. This disappearance and the charges brought against Navalny can be seen as attempts by the Kremlin to silence opposition voices and control the narrative surrounding the war. It seems Putin may be ramping up his re-election campaign around the conflict in Ukraine. The situation remains tense, and the international community's response will be crucial in the coming months. Finally, we have a tragic incident from China. A workshop collapse in Guizhou province has resulted in the death of 6 people and injuries to 3 others. Building collapses are unfortunately not uncommon in China due to the lack of proper permits and safety standards. The illegal addition of extra floors and failure to use reinforcement are often to blame. Chinese leader Xi Jinping has called for additional checks to address these issues, but industrial safety in China remains a significant concern. And there you have it, folks. A mix of economic predictions, political tensions, and tragic accidents. As always, I encourage you to share your thoughts and questions. What are your thoughts on the Fed's interest rate strategy? How should countries balance their relationships with China while protecting persecuted minorities? And what do you think about Putin's re-election campaign and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine? I can't wait to hear your perspective. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.